Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast, Coach Colin here. We are talking about what the left used to be and what it has transformed into now. It used to be a lot like the right we see today. That's what the left used to be like. Believe it or not, if you're very young, you may not even have been around back when it was like this. Someone who is right-leaning today, someone who has a red hat on, would have way more in common with someone who was a hippie back in the day. They would connect so much more than the left connects with those same hippies of the past. It's a very interesting transformation. Joe Rogan's going to be talking about that. After Joe Rogan talks about that, I'm going to be playing a little segment from an interview I did a little while ago where Jimmy Dore and I actually talk about the left and the right and what the left has become. And we kind of get into it a little bit, bump heads a little bit on the whole thing. And then after that, we'll talk a little bit about what I think needs to happen with the older left crowd who can remember what it used to be about and these new woke radical communists. Let's get into it.
We're all talking about.
Right.
And she's doing it in a polite way. And the way people turn, they had security following her. She basically got kicked out of the Pride Fest, and people are like, like they found out that she says to one guy, what do you think about Donald Trump? He was the first president in the United States to go into the White House supporting gay marriage, and like I never thought of it like that. Yeah. And they're like, oh, you're a Trump supporter. Yeah, I'm like, I always thought that the gay pride movement was about tolerance and diversity and let me be my thing and you can do your thing. Now it's like, no, you're only allowed to have one opinion. You're only allowed to have one political view. And if you step out, it's like, it's you.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it? That's the opposite of what I thought the gay movement was all about.
Well, it's the opposite of what the progressive movement's supposed to be all about. The progressive movement is all supposed to be about intelligent, well-educated, compassionate people that have a better perspective of how things are and what causes people to live in unfortunate circumstances and the inefficiencies of so many government organizations and the importance of the working class community. That's what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about being kind and helping people and supporting workers and rights and all those things. That's what it originally was. But the problem is with any ideology, if you have to have a rigid adherence to whatever the ideology states, whatever the doctrine is, that can shift it to the point where it's no longer even a progressive value, and you call yourself a progressive, yet you support all these ideas. Like you support the war in Ukraine, you support all these different things.
Censorship.
Fucking insane. Censorship, so the FBI.
The hallmark of authoritarian dictators is censorship.
Yes.
And they got people who consider themselves progressive to be for. So like I say, I've never changed. I'm for bodily autonomy, my body, my choice, which you don't hear people say anymore. What they'll say is, "Oh, I'm pro-abortion." No,
you say I'm a woman's right to choose. Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah, that's what people like to say the most.
Okay, I've heard people start saying they're pro-abortion. No one's pro-abortion.
Well,
but anyway, so I've stayed my body, my choice, bodily autonomy. I'm anti-war, I'm pro-worker, and I'm anti-censorship for free speech. Those are all considered right-wing positions now.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
But it just shows you that what we're talking about, it's just the ideology. It's just a cult. And there's two cults in this country. There's the right-wing cult and the left-wing cult. And there's a bunch of people that are centrists. There's a bunch of people that have like a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and they're kind of in the middle. And they're kind of like a left-leaning conservative or a right-leaning progressive, and they're confused, and they don't know what to think. And I think the majority of people are kind of really, if you isolated them and get them out of their tribal thinking, the way they look at the world, and if it could be explained to them in a kind way, most people are in the center. Most people. I generally think most people are. But the people on the far left are so fucking crazy, and the people that are on the far right are so fucking crazy that if you're on the left, you see the people on the far right, well, I'm not that fucking person, so I must be on the left. And then if you're on the right and you go, yeah, but I'm kind of like pretty open-minded when it comes to a lot of social issues, but then you see Antifa, you go, well, what the fuck? I'm not with those people. I must be right-wing. And then you have this chaos that we have currently.
The whole left, I don't call them, people go, oh, the far left. I just call them Democrats, right? Because that's not left if you're for war. It's not left if you're for censorship. It's not left if you're for mandating experimental medical treatments.
Right.
There's nothing left about that, right? You just vote Democrat. And these are two constructs being left, right. I don't think it matters that much. I've got way more in common with people who are considered right wing than I do with Joe fucking Biden.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and the thing is that people don't realize when they say I told you this before, when people say, oh, we have to organize along class lines, that means organizing with Trumpers. The workers. That's what Christian Smalls did on Staten Island when he organized the first union in Amazon, right? He didn't go down there and go, hey, who here is for LGBTQ? Hey, who here is a gun nut? You're out. Who's not? Who's for freedom of speech? You're out. He just went, who's here to get together? We have an economic interest to oppose the man. You with me? That's how you fucking organize. You come around and you don't have all these things that exclude. It's all about excluding people. And by the way, I found out that all this trans stuff, it's all come from the top down. It doesn't come from the bottom up. I've figured this out when I saw that Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, talk about enforcing ESG and DEI. And so that's because those companies are the ones who are raping the planet and screwing everybody. But then they stick a gay pride flag on what they're doing so they can wrap themselves in a patina of virtue. And that's all that is. And that's coming. And it's also great because it keeps us divided. So if we're fighting over bathrooms and people competing in sports and swimming and all that, then we're not, our eyes off the ball.
Right.
Our eyes off the $200 or $600 billion they're sending to the military industrial complex and an upward transfer of wealth. We're not talking about the CARES Act, the largest one. We're not talking about things that actually matter, that people are still living under bridges. People don't have health care that doesn't bankrupt them. People can't go bankrupt just trying to go to college. People don't have a decent, 80% of workers living paycheck to paycheck. Half the country can't afford a $500 emergency. All that. We're not talking about any of that stuff if we're talking about all that other stuff.
Exactly.
The one thing about that is, that's very true, what he's saying, but also that stuff does matter. You know, when people try to trivialize that as just like, who cares what washroom people are using? We've already seen where that leads. That leads to who's inside the change room with my daughter, right? She's 12 and there's somebody who's 34 and they are 6'2" with a beard and they're just like, yeah, nah, I should be allowed in here. And then matter of fact, let me just drop my pants and I'm getting changed like everybody else. That's what it turns into. So all those things that he mentioned are so important as well, right? And it's so important to raise awareness about all those things. But also you really do have to fight those smaller fights of why is this person in the bathroom and has this person been vetted, and are we going to start vetting people so we understand who's around our children, who's around our wives, et cetera, who's, you know, Riley Gaines, perfect example, you know, young girl who fought her whole life to become an elite swimmer and just like that has it all taken away. It seems pretty trivial because like, it's just swimming, but it turns into something way more. The next thing you know, and this is a real story, you got a UFC fighter who decides not to disclaim that they were born male and ends up fracturing some biological female's skull. That's a real thing that happened. And later on, that same fighter, not the one that got fractured, the other one, they ended up getting choked out by a biological woman, but no one knew. And that becomes a problem. So, you know, I agree, but also those little things actually do blow up. You know, those are the same type of things in their infancy that Jordan Peterson was trying to rise up against when he was being compelled by law to use pronouns. And it's like, well, why? Who cares? That's a trivial thing. But we've seen what that's grown into. It's grown into quite the beast of a movement now. And now we have people who are having fights with other people over these pronouns. And, you know, he just saw where that was going. So we have to understand those little things actually do grow into quite big issues when it comes to our children and whatnot. You know, funny that Trump was the first one. I didn't even realize that. That's very true, because I remember footage of Barack Obama not supporting gay marriage. Hillary Clinton, she was the president, obviously. She was like that as well. She had to change her tune. Bill Clinton as well. Or I don't even know if Bill Clinton ever even changed his tune. But yeah, Trump was the first one. How about that? How about that? My boy Trump. My victorious president. 47. The first one to walk into office just supporting gay marriage right off the bat. You know, the rest of them were bigots. You know what I mean? The rest of them were bigots. Get out of here. Isn't that funny? You never think of that when you think about Trump. Trump's done a lot. I'm not going to make this about Trump, but this is about the tolerant left. You know, it's funny how he, in the first a few seconds of that clip when he's talking about people saying F you to this person who's just asking questions. He's actually talking about Blair White. Blair White is a transgender woman who, you know, fits the perfect narrative to be around, you know, one of those, you know, LGBTQ movements. And she was just there deciding to just ask people some questions. And when they realized that she wasn't following the doctrine exactly, then they started having security follow her. You know, people were getting close to attacking her. They were definitely verbally going at her quite a bit. It's funny. It's funny to see, really funny to see that you have to follow. And I've experienced that same thing, right? Like people look at me, it's like I'm wearing hoodies all the time. I'm black. And then, you know, I have hand tattoos. I have tattoos all up and down my arms and my back. And the next thing you know, they just assume that I'm a certain leaning. And then all of a sudden they figure out that I'm very much a Republican, very much MAGA, very much down with Trump fully. Then all of a sudden it becomes, oh, you're brainwashed. Oh, you're an Uncle Tom. Oh, you're like, they start all of a sudden, all the slings start. Oh, you know, like somebody in the Instagram comment section just recently, you know how they have the saying, the Democrat plantation? This guy tried to flip it. He's like, oh, you're going to fit in the Trump plantation. White guy telling me I'm going to be on a plantation. I was like, all decency goes out the window once somebody realizes that you're on the right, and even more so when they realize that you fully support Trump. It's so wild to see. But here's a little clip of Jimmy and I going back and forth about the right and the left. Let me move myself there. Look, I'm in 2 squares there. Look at that. Absolutely crazy. This is me and Jimmy sitting down. Just a couple of minutes. Let's play this. On it, I made like 5 videos in a week about it. And then right away, because the channel usually gets like 3 million views a month, and then right away it went down to like 500,000, and I couldn't get past 80,000 subscribers. Right. And I was like, huh, interesting. Like it just kept staying very, like it was really weird. It just completely is like it's a switch. They got a switch. They can switch you on, switch you off.
Meanwhile, they artificially boost channels like the Young Turks, right? Because they're funded by the donor class. Jeffrey Katzenberg gave them $20 million. So
I really do wonder about those very left-leaning channels and the things they post. Because I know when I post a certain title, they'll be like, oh, this is limited. I know when I say certain things, it gets limited. I wonder if when they say F Trump and they have like a title like that, I wonder if anything happens. I wonder if they ever get limited for anything they say.
So I just have a bone to pick with the kind of language of they're left leaning. They're not left. Left is supposed to be anti-war, pro-worker, anti-establishment, my body, my choice, bodily autonomy. The Young Turks are none of those things. They are completely authoritarian establishment fucks. They're not.
But that's
They're
what the
Democrat.
That's what the left is now. That's what it seems like.
But that's not the left. They're now. That's not left.
Well, let me ask you about that, because that was one of the questions that I had. Because
that's
for
Democrats,
I understand. For the longest time, that is what the left stood for. It didn't stand for that. It stand for freedom of speech.
It still does. I'm a lefty. I'm still for freedom of speech. I'm still for my bodily autonomy, my body, my choice. I'm still anti-war. I'm still pro-worker. I'm still pro-union. They are none of those things.
But the people
are union fucking busters. They're always pro-war. They were for lockdowns. They're for mandates. They're for.
I'm just saying the younger generation of the left is for all those things. But they are for anti. What are they then? What are they then?
They're because right-wing authoritarians. That's what they are. They're establishment authoritarians.
Okay, move away from the Young Turks, because I'm talking about the younger left-leaning people. Like
what is that? What do you mean by left-leaning? What are they? What makes them left-leaning?
Well, the fact that they're liberal. I'll go exactly what you just said. The fact that they're Democrats, I go with them being left-leaning.
Democrats are authoritarian, pro-war, anti-worker party. There's nothing left about the Democrats.
But they used to stand for. They used to stand for that.
I'm saying they used to, but they're not anymore. So they're not.
My question is, what happened? That's what I'm trying to get through. What actually happened, and when did that switch happen?
So that happened with Bill Clinton. So that happened with Bill Clinton when he decided to take corporate money, Wall Street, the military, industrial, oil, big pharma, totally changed what used to be called the Republican right-wing parties in America. It's one government. There's nobody out there looking out. There's nobody out there that's anti-war. There's nobody out there that's. So if you notice the abortion, they never used to do pro-abortion. Abortion is a horrible, something is turned into disgusting. So nobody, but that's what they say now. It's NBC, CNN, and you hear abortion
parties. And that's 100% not true. But the reason I play that clip is I think guys like Jimmy, people in that age group, Bill Maher could even be seen as one of these people. There has to be a radical calling out of the woke crowd, because that's what he's here. He's seeing what the woke has become, and he's saying, "Oh, well, that's right-wing authoritarianism." And it's like, no, that's the left now. That's what they do now. There's many people on the right. I mean, you can just name Tucker Carlson. You can name so many people on the right now who are very pro freedom of speech. They are very anti cancel culture. They are very much for my body, my choice, although they may be pro-life as well, because a lot of people on the right are very Christian, goes against the Christian doctrine. They're for women's rights. They are anti-war. There's so many people on the right who are displaying this now. They're pro-worker as well. Workers. Trump has a lot in Agenda 47 about the war and trying to bring back all sorts of things, factory, things of that nature, United States, and they're anti-censorship. When you're seeing all that happening on the right, and you're seeing it become, there has to be these, what they're called now is class rules. They have to call this out. They have to themselves somehow this wokeness, whether it's the progressives, woke, far left, however you want to brand it, because all those things fall into the same lap. The people of old have to call out what the new left is really do. There has to be you can't just ignore it, because what Jimmy's trying to do now is just say, well, that's all right, different age. Because if the young people who are on the right nowadays, and I happen to be one of them, none of us are pro censorship. All of us are pro-worker. I was a worker for the longest time. Factory worker, forklift driver, cherry pick, like picking orders and stuff for the longest time. Super anti-war. So many people on the right want to see no more money go to Ukraine, and a bunch of people don't want to see any money go to Israel if it's for war. And even, outside of that, they want to see money start going to the American people who need it. Women's rights fully, because if you're a real Christian, you actually are for women's rights. A lot of people on the right are, not everyone, of course, and fully about bodily autonomy. So many people on the right are all about this. So once that happens, you can't just now say, well, that's not true, and what's going on the left, that's just right. So now it's all just right, and now none of this matters. It's like, that's not true. There is a left party. There is a left and a right now. And I'm saying left and right so much. They really do need to call out the woke people, call out the people who are showing signs of being authoritarians. They really do have to call that out and let people know, the new people, the young people that are left leaning, let them know that that's not what this party's about. They really should be doing that. They should be making videos about it. They should be doing documentaries about it. Like, there should be a lot going on in order for the classic left, hippie type, I'll just say that, because, I'm thinking from like the 60s and whatnot. They should be distancing themselves so much. And that way, when you do that, now the people who are on the right, who are for all those things, who are pro, anti-censorship, anti-war, all those people on the right and those classic liberals can now start to unify and now start to realize that they have so much in common. And now we can all turn to the woke people of the world and say, this is nonsense. What you're doing is nonsense. But as long as there's people who either ignore it, like Jimmy was doing, or there's older people who also embrace it, guys like Mark Cuban, guys like Mark Hamill, guys like, even Jack Black, they embrace the woke nonsense and they take it on and they say, yeah, that's what we're about now. That, I don't know, man. I think that's the worst thing that can happen. I think that's adding to the divide more than ever, in my opinion. But I just was thinking about that really, really quickly. I hate listening to myself, so it was agony going through that clip. I know there's a certain part of the audience that hates listening to me as well. I understand completely, believe me. But what do you think in the comments section? If you're an old school liberal, are you calling out the woke nonsense? Because I know there's some people who are older who listen to this podcast. Are you calling out the woke nonsense, or are you embracing it and saying this is just the evolution of the party, of the side, or are you distancing yourself from it? Because I don't think we're at a point anymore, especially when we look at what's really happening on the far left, where we can just ignore it. And the same goes for people who are on the right, who are looking at the far right. There's a lot of people who are far right who are so anti-Jewish people, and I don't identify with that. I don't look at that and say, well, I guess that's just what we do. We're all just brother in arms here. I don't do that. I say, no, this is that's a terrible take for you to have. I don't know. I'm just wondering about that, because the lines are not being drawn like I think they should be. I'm just wondering what people are starting to think about that. Anyways, guys, like, subscribe, comment, turn on the notifications. It helps the channel tremendously. And other than that, I'm out.